Former Congressman Joe Sestak is a former Navy Admiral. He's running for the Democratic nomination to face off against Republican United States Senator Pat Toomey. His insight into this situation is invaluable. Joe Sestak, thanks so much for the call.
Good to be back with you, Steve. Thanks.
So what's your take on this?
Well, overall, I think this is a kind of incident that is not uncommon. I mean, I've operated there. I've been on those riverine patrol boats. I've actually had helicopters that I had to send over as Iranian small craft came towards two other of my riverine patrol boats that I had out there. That's a very busy place there. When you're operating, there's hundreds of small boats going back and forth doing cigarette smuggling from the United Arab Emirates into Iran. It's a tough area. And so this thing either broke down one of our boats or in a GPS error, much like sometimes GPS doesn't work here, the satellite, you lose the signal. It went into territorial waters of Iran. And we were fortunate that unlike what happened in 2007, when something similar happened to the British Navy, and those sailors did not come home for 13 days, in this case, because we had communications with Iran through the Iranian Accord discussions, we were able to pick up the phone and make sure that the law of the sea, of helping somebody, even within your own territorial waters, that might have had a damaged engine or was lost at sea, and they were returned. And I think it went down right by the book of what should have occurred as far as that portion of it.
Do you believe that the tensions that existed prior to the Iranian Accord are a little bit less tense? That the decrease in tension, the increase in diplomatic relations between the United States and Iran might very well have helped resolve this potential crisis?
I do, based upon the following. These were Iranian Revolutionary Guards that were that took these boats into custody. If it had been the Iranian Navy or the Iranian regular Coast Guard, I found them at sea to be extraordinarily professional. I'm going down your starboard side at 500 yards. We would have communications like that. But guess what? It was Iranian Revolutionary Guard. In the middle of the night, they come out, one of those fast patrol boats that seemed to be sneaking cigarettes. All of them, one would veer towards my aircraft carrier, and I had to have a helicopter go over, shine lights on them, start to, short light on and off, like stop or we'll take you down. I believe that communications that we established, because of that Iranian Accord and the fact that we worked something out that was in our security and Israel's greatest security, did lead to the ease of having communications to resolve this. And also, Steve, this. When I was an admiral in charge of the carrier battle group there, because of these kind of tense situations, I sent a message off that recommended that we actually have an incident at sea agreement with Iran, much like we had in the Cold War with the Soviet Union, when we went eyeball to eyeball with them, and with the People's Republic of China, to where if something happened on the commons of the sea, because everyone owns the sea equally, except if it's your territorial waters, we could have a hotline as an incident fee agreement, pick up the phone and call the other nation and say, hey, here's the issue, what do you got? And resolve it. It wasn't accepted, but I was so taken with how tense it was out there in the Persian Gulf that I actually sent a recommendation out on this, and hopefully something like this will come up. Because you can have a small crisis like this erupt into something much bigger that could be a conflagration if you're not careful.
When we talk about diplomacy, often we think of John Kerry, the Secretary of State. We think about ambassadors. But in many ways, the young commander who offered that apology and said, we made a mistake, in many ways, he was being diplomatic, don't you think?
I think that if anybody wants to criticize that young sailor, particularly those who haven't served, they are absolutely wrong. When I joined up during the Vietnam era, they stated that you gave your name, rank, serial number, and that was about it. But during the Hanoi Hilton and the torture that John McCain and others went through, that senior officer in charge here, the United States officer, said to the prisoners, no, You give what you feel is necessary as you're going through issues to get out, because we recognize that is the right approach. And if you were going to tell somebody something, it was all right. And so I don't know what the exact rules are now, but no, I think that anyone who wants to criticize that young sailor who is serving us forward for anything is absolutely wrong.
I believe sometimes de-escalation is a true mark of strength because it requires discipline, it requires intelligence, it requires an ability to stay calm in the midst of crisis, and I think that most people see it like that. As far as the future of the Iranian Accord, I know that we're neither of us in the business of reading minds, but do you believe that this was an incident that might very well help us and Iran deal with each other in the future?
I would like to think so, and here's why. ISIS is a common enemy of Iran and the United States of America. The Iranians have lost 3,000 soldiers in Syria fighting ISIS. They don't want ISIS to survive. And we could, as I've said, I think on your show, at least others, come together with a common cause on certain spots, like even with Russia and Putin, who's there, who doesn't want ISIS to survive. That doesn't mean we're not going to thwart them with sanctions like we should if they fire a ballistic missile like they did. But you can begin to build some confidence, much like we did during the Cold War, and we won that Cold War when we did start and soft nuclear talks with Russia, which was then the Soviet Union. But Steve, you said something very important. And if I could come back to that, we rely upon calm heads and minds out there, unlike those Washington, D.C. people who sit down there and just say carpet bomb or something. Our young soldiers and sailors are out there to defend themselves, their crew, America, but also not to get into undue incidents that bring us to such dangerous situations. When I took a ship through the Straits of Hormuz, no Iranian warplane had ever overflown a United States Navy ship. They can because it's international waters. And the Soviet Union used to. And we were briefed on it. And there's rules that you go by to look whether that aircraft coming towards you might have a fire control radar locking on to you to fire. I went through that Straits of Hormuz, and all of a sudden, an aircraft took off that was military, which we knew from its radar from Iran. It started trekking towards us in the Straits of Hormuz, and you can't maneuver in that Straits of Hormuz. You're almost going straight forward. You can turn once maybe to clear your batteries to fire, and that's it. And it kept coming, and we had Mother May I there. You're reporting what's happening, but we're leaving it to that young captain of that ship to make a decision. And you know what? It overflew us. But we let it, and it should have been let go. It was the right decision because we no fire control radar lit up. But that's the kind of incidents that are out there, and that's why, Steve, to your point, that young sailor, anyone there, we need calm, cool minds, yet are ready to take down anyone who does show hostile intent or hostile action.
Well, I'll tell you, Joe Sestak, in December of 1968, I was 17 years old, and there was a guy from the rural community where I was living and going to high school, and he was a member of the crew of the Pueblo, and I urge everybody to go back in history, not that long ago, when the Navy's USS Pueblo was taken over by the people of North Korea. The crew, after 11 months of torture and starvation, was eventually released after negotiation and a false apology by the U.S. But I invite people to revisit history, Joe, because we got out of this one without any kind of trouble like we had in that one.
And a year ago, we may not have, because we may not have had the communications where John Kerry could pick it up the phone and call directly to the foreign minister. Look, I believe maybe Washington, D.C. should take some lessons among the Republicans and Democrats of talking to each other sometimes. But of greater import is out there, because at the end of the day, we are defending America out there. But let's make sure we don't go into harm's way if we don't have to, only if we must.
Joe Sestak, always good to talk with you. Your expertise is welcome.
Thank you, Steve. Have a great day.
Thank you. Joe Sestak, a good perspective on a crisis that was averted in many ways with the help of a young Navy commander who should be commended. We'll be right back.